Morgan Freeman is 88 years old.
I'm Morgan Freeman.
He is the voice of God. He is the moral authority of American cinema. He feels inevitable.
Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your research on the human brain. We need to meet.
All of my research? Well, I'm very flattered, young lady, but I find that hard to believe.
But there is a statistic about his life that makes absolutely no sense. Morgan Freeman did not get his first major movie role until he was 50. Think about that. For 3 decades, the entire prime of his life, Hollywood didn't just ignore him, it didn't know he existed. While De Niro and Pacino were building empires in their 30s, Morgan Freeman was unemployed. He was battling alcoholism. He was trapped in a kids' show he hated. And at age 49, he was days away from quitting to drive a taxi. We like to tell ourselves that talent always rises to the top, that cream floats. But Morgan Freeman's career proves the exact opposite. He wasn't ignored because he wasn't good enough. He was ignored because Hollywood didn't know what to do with a black man who had authority until they found a way to use it against him. To understand the tragedy of Morgan Freeman's career, you have to look at the photos we aren't supposed to see. There are no high-definition headshots of him in his 20s. There are no clips of him playing the young, rebellious heartthrob, because those roles didn't exist for him. In 1964, while Hollywood was busy minting new stars, Morgan Freeman was a mechanic in the Air Force. He wasn't studying Stanislavski. He was fixing radar tracking stations. When he finally moved to New York to pursue acting, he didn't land on a movie set. He landed at the 1964 World's Fair, not as an actor, but as a dancer. It is almost impossible to picture now. The man with the gravitas of a grandfather was kicking up his heels on stage just to pay rent. He later described himself during this time as a drifter. He was surviving on what he called the arrogance of youth, eating rice and beans, waiting for a door to open. But in the 1960s, Hollywood had a very specific lock on that door. The industry had exactly one slot for a black leading man, and it was filled by Sidney Poitier. Poitier was elegant, safe, and polished. He was the kind of black man white audiences felt comfortable inviting to dinner. Morgan Freeman was not that. He was tall, gangly, and intense. He had a voice that sounded like gravel, not velvet.
Wow. I'll tell you an interesting story. Hello, I'm Morgan Freeman.
That's my man.
One of these days, that's going to be me. One of these days, I'm going to be in the movies. Now, how do you do that? Imagination.
He didn't fit the noble Negro archetype of the 60s, and he certainly didn't fit the blaxploitation hero of the 70s. So, he fell into the crack between them. For nearly 10 years, he was a ghost in the industry. A working actor, sure, but a movie star? Impossible. And just when he thought he was going to disappear completely, he got a job offer that felt like a lifeline. It turned out to be a prison. The job was the Electric Company. It was a children's educational show produced by the same people who made Sesame Street, and in 1971 it became a massive hit. For the first time in his life, Morgan Freeman had a steady paycheck. He had fame. He was Easy Reader, the cool, sunglasses-wearing hipster who loved to read. Millions of kids adored him. But Morgan Freeman hated him. He hated the sunglasses. He hated the catchphrases. He felt like a clown. He was a classically trained actor capable of playing Othello or Coriolanus, and he was spending his days sounding out vowels for toddlers. He later said, "I was very unhappy. I was drinking too much." While the cameras were rolling, he was the hip, smiling face of literacy. When the cameras cut, he was sinking into a deep depression. He felt trapped in a colorful educational purgatory. This went on for 6 years. 6 years of his prime gone. When he finally left the show in 1977, he didn't graduate to movie stardom. He drifted again. He landed a role on a soap opera, Another World, playing a doctor. It was steady work, but it was another trap. It was factory acting, reciting dialogue meant to be forgotten the second it was spoken. By 1986, Morgan Freeman was 49 years old. His hair was turning gray. The industry had decided he was a television character actor, a face in the crowd. He had 0 major film credits. The despair hit a breaking point. He actually looked up the requirements for a chauffeur's license. He was ready to quit acting, drive a taxi, or drive a bus. He figured his window had closed. And honestly, by Hollywood standards, it had. But then, a script landed on his desk for a movie called Street Smart. The role wasn't a doctor, it wasn't a teacher, and it certainly wasn't the voice of God. The movie was supposed to be a vehicle for Christopher Reeve. He was Superman. He was the star. But nobody walked out of the theater talking about Superman. They walked out talking about the pimp. The character's name was Fast Black. On paper, it was a cliché, a violent, flashy pimp in a gritty crime drama. It was the kind of role Hollywood usually gave to generic, tough guys. But Morgan Freeman didn't play him like a caricature. He played him like a shark. He was charming, intelligent, and absolutely terrifying. There is a scene where he threatens Christopher Reeve with a pair of scissors. It isn't loud, it isn't screaming, it is quiet intimacy. And in that moment, at age 50, the industry finally saw him. The legendary critic Pauline Kael watched the film and famously asked in The New Yorker, "Is Morgan Freeman the greatest American actor?" Think about the whiplash of that question. One minute, he is considering driving a taxi. The next, he is being compared to Brando. He received his first Oscar nomination for the role. But here is the cruel irony. To get Hollywood to respect his dignity, he had to play a man who stripped dignity from others. To show them his authority, he had to be violent. It was the only time in his career he was allowed to be truly dangerous. And Hollywood's reaction to this performance was fascinating. They didn't say, "Let's give him more complex, dangerous roles." They panicked. They saw a black man with that much power, that much command of the screen, and they realized they couldn't ignore him anymore. But they also decided they couldn't let him be that scary again. So, they did what the industry always does when it finds something it can't control. They sanitized him. It took exactly 2 years for Hollywood to neutralize the threat. In 1987, Morgan Freeman was the most terrifying man in cinema. By 1989, he was the safest. The movie was Driving Miss Daisy, and the role was Hoke Colburn, a patient, subservient chauffeur in the segregated South. The contrast is dizzying. He went from holding a pair of scissors to a pimp's throat to holding a steering wheel and saying, "Yes'm." The Academy loved it. They nominated him for Best Actor. The movie won Best Picture. But culturally, this was the moment the trap snapped shut. Hollywood realized that Morgan Freeman's voice, that deep, resonant baritone, didn't have to be used for danger. It could be used for comfort. It could be used to make white audiences feel absolved. This began the era of what film critics call the magical Negro trope. For the next 2 decades, Morgan Freeman played the same character over and over again. The wise, mystical helper who has no life of his own, but exists solely to help a white protagonist find their way. Look at the filmography. In Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, he is the wise Moor helping Kevin Costner. In The Shawshank Redemption, he is the wise prisoner helping Tim Robbins. In Seven, he is the wise detective helping Brad Pitt. In Batman Begins, he is the wise inventor helping Christian Bale. And finally, the ultimate apotheosis of the trope. Bruce Almighty. He literally plays God. But even as God, his only job is to help Jim Carrey get his girlfriend back. We applaud these roles because he brings so much dignity to them. He elevates the material. But we rarely stop to ask why the man with the most commanding presence in Hollywood spent 20 years playing the sidekick. Why was he never the one driving the car? Why was he never the one with the internal conflict? The industry decided that his authority was only palatable if it was in service of someone else. They bought the voice, but they silenced the man. Today, Morgan Freeman is undeniable. He is an institution. When he speaks, the world listens. But looking back at the architecture of his career, it is hard not to feel a sense of loss. Because we missed him. We missed the young, angry, passionate Morgan Freeman. We missed his taxi driver. We missed his godfather. Imagine if Al Pacino hadn't been cast in a movie until Scent of a Woman. We would have lost Michael Corleone. That is essentially what happened with Morgan Freeman. We only got the third act of his life. His story isn't a fairy tale about how talent eventually shines through. It is a gritty story about endurance. It is about a man who had to survive depression, alcoholism, and decades of indifference just to get a seat at the table. And once he got there, he had to compromise. He had to accept that the industry valued his authority more than his complexity. They didn't want him to be the lead. They wanted him to be the narrator. Hollywood rewards survival more than it rewards brilliance. It waits until you are undeniable, and then it pretends it discovered you. So the next time you hear that deep, soothing voice narrating a documentary or giving advice to a superhero, don't just hear God. Hear the sound of a man who refused to let them silence him, even if he had to wait 30 years for permission to speak.